Welcome everyone to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you're here for this Catalyst Astrology report. We are looking at the lunar month that started with a new moon in Pisces on March 13th. And this report is going to take us up through the end of this lunar cycle, which is April 11th, 2021. So the next new moon will be the first new moon of spring. So we are still settling up some things with this lunar cycle that started with a new moon in Pisces, and we're going to talk about the intention behind it. We've already gone through a couple days here of this lunar cycle, and I've talked about there's been astrology and references to this time of year in the dailies that you can check out on this channel, regardless if you're on BitChute or YouTube. You can just scroll back and the daily medicine transmissions are all there. And there's astrology woven into each of those transmissions because it's so relevant to how we consciously co-create with the time wave that is unfolding. So this is going to be a really incredible lunar month. It's just an incredible time of year. We have the spring equinox that's coming. We have the trifecta of Passover, Good Friday, and Easter that's part of this lunar cycle as well. And everything leading up to the equinox really is, we have the Ides of March, we have St. Patrick's Day, which is today, and we have just so much energy, even with Passover and Good Friday. All of it is indicative of this part of the cycle, regardless if we are in the spring or moving into the fall where we are at in the southern hemisphere. Either way you look at it, this time of year is about a consummation. So in the northern hemisphere, as we come into spring, we're really coming into a consummation of a collective cycle. So this new moon and the intention behind it is really about figuring out who we are as things start to consolidate from this formless ocean of experience, right? Pisces in the 12th house. This is the settling of accounts, the settling of debts. This is the time where we start to that we come to terms with the karma that has been accumulated over the previous cycle, in this case, the last year. And we start to consolidate all of those experiences and how we understand them, right? And coming into a renewal, right? Which is the spring. And all of these, the Ides of March, like I said, the settling of debts, St. Patrick's Day even, the spring equinox, Passover, Good Friday, even Easter. These all represent aspects of the cycle where there is something that we have to let go of. There's something that we have to come to terms with. There is something that needs to be released in order to make room for renewal and growth and rebirth, which is what spring really represents. And autumn too, right? The autumn equinox is the same consummation point because it's a harvest of everything we've been cultivating. So regardless of where you find yourself on the globe, we're at a point now where we are settling up and moving into the next phase. So with this new moon in particular, we are being set up to address our own role within this collective process. So what is our dharma? Who are we? And what are our limitations? That's another thing that we need to be asking ourselves as we are finishing out this collective cycle. What is it that we have participated in? What is it that we have given our energy to? What decisions have we made that will impact the next cycle? And what we do now will have an impact on how that next cycle, in this case, the yearly cycle with the equinox. I mean, we are now coming into the astrological new year. So what are our limitations? What is it that pulls us off of our center? And what is our dharma? Because we have to accept our assets and our limitations as the fullness of who we are. And when we can do that, then we can really actually work towards manifestation of the life that we came here to live, and the life that our soul is pulling us towards in order to evolve. So there's a vast ocean around us, and we are in some ways an island, and all the different parts of our psyche can operate interdependently to make a whole organic being that will be encapsulated in the seed of the Aries cycle. But everything that seed will become is enclosed in the seed at the end of the Pisces time. And so this is why it's so important for each of us to know who we are, what our challenges are, what our assets are, and what our dharma is. What is our social responsibility? What is our mission in this lifetime? And how are we going to, we may not know exactly how we're going to enact it, but it's through this new moon process that we are going to learn who we are and what we're here to do. And it's not going to come from anybody telling us what is or isn't. It is only going to come through a very deep dive into who we are. And there's going to be so many things that pull us off our center, potentially to keep us from realizing the truth of who we are and the power that we actually have to create reality. And this is going to be highlighted really strongly with the full moon. The moon will be in Libra, the sun in Aries, and in conjunction with Venus and Chiron, okay? So today in the Daily Medicine, I talked about St. Patrick, because it is St. Patrick's Day. And I also talked about, let's do this. I also talked about Chiron and the position that Chiron is in right now, because it's in a sextile to Mars. And we're going to look at the chart as we go along so that you have a visual and can see the progression over the next couple of weeks, what to expect. But this position that Chiron is in right now is really important because it's going to be completely wrapped up in the full moon. And there will continue to be connections with this position throughout this cycle. And it's really about, if we want to actualize and manifest the subjective experience of who we are, right, without any shame or guilt, because that is Chiron, we have to be able to focus on the whole picture. We need to be able to concentrate our attention on the full picture, right? We need to relax our gaze a little bit so that we can look into the crystal ball, so to speak, and see the big picture, and in its fullness and its wholeness, and not get pulled into a linear trajectory that's being provided for us to take our attention away from who we are and what we're here to do. Because each person this is about the age of Aquarius. Each person plays their individual sovereign role within the whole. And that is when each person is at their highest spiritual version of themselves, at their highest potential and actualization. Then the age of Aquarius is the true awakening and evolution of humanity. If we aren't, then we just become drones, right? We just become the Borg, right? We don't have any individuality. We don't have any sovereignty. We don't have any freedom to be ourselves. We just are being told what to do, how to do it, and we're just a cog in somebody else's machine. That is the dark side of Aquarius, right? Stripping away true collectivism and totalitarianism. So we want to actualize our own individual subjective potential at our highest form so that we aren't going down that pathway. It's up to us to create the reality that we want to be in. And that means we have to actually take a conscious and intentional step, many steps in some ways towards that. So this full moon it's going to be unavoidable. Our wounding of self that will pull our attention away from the focus that allows us to actually identify with that part of ourselves, the potency of our desire to be ourselves, right? That is Aries energy, the potency of it. It's going to be bright. It's going to be bold. It's going to be something we're very sensitive to. It's going to be very palpable with Venus involved. And it's going to trigger the wounding that will take us out of that concentrated attention. Just guaranteed something massive, either in our personal lives or on the public stage, right, is going to provide the light and shine on that part of ourselves that either shows us what we have developed so far along this lunar cycle in terms of our guidance system and who we are and what we're made of and how we and what our dharma is, or it's going to show us the false knowledge and the false masters that we have propped up or have been propped up for us, right? Propped up for us that we see and we're like, oh, those are the things that I should be following. Yet we didn't come to it from our own concentrated attention. We listened to somebody else tell us what it is for us. And either way, this full moon is going to be very illuminating about that. And it'll either be a confirmation of us on the right path, or it'll be a confirmation that there are things that need to be released in order to still work through this process and really come to understand who we each individually are. And so by the time we get to the next new moon, the new moon of the spring, the first new moon of the spring, we will be ready to actually put that into action. But right now, we're still settling up. We're still learning about who we are. We're still realizing our dharma as a result of everything that we've experienced as part of the last cycle and what we've learned. And Pisces is not an easy time. So there's so much propaganda. There's so much false light. There's just everything and anything is available to us, and we can easily find ourselves drowning within this, or being a strong swimmer, or riding a surfboard, or being on a boat. Either way, however you want to characterize it, it's important to realize that we could easily get sucked back into the ocean with a strong undertow if we are not focused on our responsibilities on this island, whatever it is. I keep thinking about Gilligan's Island because all of those 7 characters, right? 7, they are there and they each have a role to play. And when they each play their role to the fullest, then they operate as a cohesive unit. And it's eventually to get off the island, but we don't necessarily have to totally get off the island. We can learn to live with the collective unconscious, to go into that space, to utilize it, to gather resources from it, but we don't have to drown in it. And I think a lot of people are, in fact, drowning in it right now, and not even realizing that's what's happening. And the demoralization is really strong during this time. So let's look at the chart and go through it bit by bit, shall we? All right, guys. So this is today. This is St. Patrick's Day. I already talked about this on the daily, but just to show you that the moon here was in a square to Saturn. And there's going to be a lot of connection this month, this lunar month specifically, with Saturn, with the Aries energy. There's going to be sextiles with the Sun and Venus, and even with Chiron eventually. Well, probably not Chiron. Venus and Mercury will eventually move into Aries at the very end of this cycle as well. So, but there'll be sextiles to Saturn in Aquarius. Mars in Gemini is also, there's going to be sextiles to Mars in Gemini. There's going to be sextiles to the North Node, which means that all of this Aries energy will be in trine to the South Node. So there's a lot of opportunities here to participate and invest in these harmonious connections between. There's a lot of fire and there's a lot of air in this chart this coming month, as we transition out of Pisces, especially the personal planets, the Sun and Venus, and then and Mars and Gemini. There's a lot of fire and there's a lot of air within how we each individually act and interact with the world around us. Okay. We do have Mercury is out of shadow now, is in Pisces. And so the communication and the information is so much more inspired, potentially, so much more dreamy and imaginative. There's incredible psychic link here if we can allow our minds to settle into the ocean of consciousness and to be able to, the thing about concentrated attention and the crystal ball, quote unquote, this is a Pisces realm because it's watery and it's on our periphery, right? It's not very, Aquarius is like a laser focus and Pisces is completely dispersed. So, but what you can gather from that unconscious realm through the mind and information and communication with Mercury here is incredibly inspired and beautiful. And we could really have very strong psychic impressions that we can even communicate during this time if we allow our mind to be more imaginative, to indulge the creative side of ourselves, to be willing to be more visual and clairvoyant, I guess, rather than being so hyper-focused in our minds. We have Mars in Gemini, and that's much more about projecting these ideas. We have the North Node in Gemini, which is really where we are being pulled towards in order to collectively evolve. And so there is a lot of air energy here too. And the moon's going to come into Gemini over the weekend with the spring equinox. And so it's going to meet Mars, it's going to meet the North Node. There's going to be an infusion of mental energy and movement of information and movement in our immediate environment that we're going to feel very strongly, and we're going to feel a strong urge to act on it. The head of the dragon is really going to pull us towards bridging this gap with communication, and that's really where we're headed. This is about communicating with each other. We are developing new collective values. That's Sagittarius, and that is the South Node. We've already done that. We've been there. That is not the trajectory of us right now, although we can reflect back on that and know we've come from that before. We've had collective values that are so strong that pull together all of these elements of a society and give us a belief system to really create from. But that's not where we're at right now. That's not the trajectory that we're headed. And Mars is really going to support this because, again, all this action and enterprising and penetration that Mars, it's the warrior. And the moon is going to make that very personal over the weekend while we have a spring equinox. So things are going to turn on really soon. And we each need to be focused, very focused on who we are, what we're here to do, and be willing to engage with what is presented to us. Be willing to entertain and coalesce, with the imagination and the creative potential where Mercury in Pisces is. Mercury is during the cycle is going to meet Neptune. Okay, so there is. If we do not know what our responsibility is, what our dharma is, who we are, what we're here to do, what our limitations are, what our restrictions are, if we're not aware of all of this stuff as we each are coalescing into this renewal and rebirth stage at the astrological new year, if we are not aware of that, when Mercury meets Neptune, we'll just fall for anything. We really will. And somebody will say, here, I have the mandate from the top of the mountain. And we'll be like, okay, but if we're doing the work and if we are really letting go of all the extraneous aspects, and that's going to come about later with Mercury and Uranus in a sextile. Okay, so let's look at some major themes here, right? Today is Wednesday. We're going to look at tomorrow just because Venus is going to sextile Pluto. Now, the sun has already done this, and the moon has already done this sextile to Pluto. So now, again, Venus, the goddess of love, the goddess of sensuality. She's very sensitive and beautiful. She rules Taurus. In Pisces, so very imaginative and so loving and just this really, really sensitive to the overall compassion and universal love right now. Also, is also very much dissolving into the ocean of consciousness because she just absorbs, right? She is magnetic. She pulls towards her. And so she really is absorbing quite a bit. This sextile, though, to Pluto, just like with the sun before it and the moon before that, this is a culmination point. And that is being supported in a way by Pluto in its destructive phase and destroying all of the pathways that we normally have had to get to this top of our awareness, right? To ascend up to the mountain, there's a pathway, there's a pilgrimage path that has been there for as long as we can remember, and Pluto now in Capricorn coming along and just destroying it, because again, we're making new pathways. We are building new alliances. We are bridging the gap in communication rather than falling back on the collective values that we have been working with. Pluto is just like destroying all of that. And Venus in is like the harvest moon, right? So you've already have this culmination and consummation point, illuminating everything, right? The harvest moon illuminating the autumn sky. And even though we're talking about the winter into spring, it still holds true that this is a moment of consummation. And so Venus, again, everything that we need is we're being shown everything that we need, and some of what we need, or when it comes to Pluto at least, what we need is to make room for new pathways of ascension, right? We have to the old ways are not working, and you can see the demoralization is happening because people keep trying to go along the same pathway and they're finding that it's being erased right in front of their eyes, or there's an avalanche that has totally wiped out the pathway, or a mudslide, and now we don't know where to go. We have to find a new pathway up the mountain, which is ultimately going to be for our benefit. And Venus in that sextile, it's very palpable. It's in our relationships. It's in our material world. And this is tomorrow. This is the 18th. Okay. So this is a pattern that has been unfolding with the sun and the moon already in this relationship to Pluto, is now going to become very, like I said, very palpable and very material when Venus comes and makes this connection. So it's something in our resources, something in our relationship. Well, everything will be in a consummation there, which will support the process of Pluto being destructive, right? Because it keeps taking away aspects that we are comfortable and familiar, and give us power, institutional power. That's what Capricorn represents, the matrix of reality. Without that, we're like, what are we? Where do we belong? Well, we're developing new pathways here, okay? So and then coming into the weekend, so that's tomorrow, the 18th. So coming into the weekend, this is where the moon comes into Gemini. We have the spring equinox. The sun comes to 0 degrees Aries. This is on the 20th on Saturday. The moon has already passed Mars, has already passed the North Node, and is in later Gemini. It's actually at 17 degrees Gemini at the exact time of the spring equinox, and that is a robust youth, maturing into an intelligent thinker, right? It's going from that really explosive and passionate expression of self, right? Because Gemini is about expression and communication. It's going from that stage, and it's morphing from that robust and youthful position into a maturity. And so from a personal level and from a feeling-based level with the moon at the time of the spring equinox, we will be feeling a transition. And this is after meeting Mars, after meeting the North Node, that is wanting to bridge the gap, that is wanting to give us, that is giving us the tools to focus in, right? The quiver of arrows that Mars is ready to shoot at any moment. And Mars is the warrior, and so it's practiced and is and brave and courageous and is on point. And so we can use our thoughts, our ideas, our expression, the movement within our immediate environment to hone in and hit the bullseye. And once the moon passes those points, then the spring equinox happens, and there is a collective fulfillment and identification with this renewal, right? We come, out of the ocean of unconsciousness, and starting to actually be within the subjective experience, but it's all desire at this point. We're still at a time where we could easily fall back in. Now, this is important because right after the equinox, we come to the first quarter square. This is a crisis in action. What are we going to do? So we've had our new moon, right, about being the island amongst within the vast ocean of unconscious energy, which is the Pisces energy. We are starting to learn who we are, what our dharma is, our limitations, our assets. Everything from the last cycle is all culminating, coming to a consummation, and we bring that energy with us into the next cycle, encapsulated in the seed. Well, immediately from that moment of emergence from the unconscious, from the formless, that the spring equinox represents. The moment that happens, right after that, we have first quarter square. We have the sun exalted in Aries. It's not at home, but it's exalted in Aries, so very powerful still. And we have the moon at home in Cancer, right? We're going to feel quite the strain here with this. Now, 2 degrees of any sign, there is the representation of the complete opposite of the essence of that sign. So 1 degree of Aries is the emergence out of form out of formlessness, right? And 1 degree of Cancer is the establishing of the root system, right? You raise the flag that you are going to fly, and you make a decision. And that is the nadir, right? That is the place where you are rooted in your personal power. And this is where our familial bonds are created. This is where loyalty lies in Cancer in the 4th house, who we identify ourselves with, and what not even institution, but these familial bonds, these emotional bonds, the place where we feel safe and secure, and where self-esteem is created. It's all in this Cancer archetype. And so the moon is at home here because that is the vessel that holds our emotional vulnerability, which is the moon, and our ability to feel. These two, when you come into the 2nd degree of any sign, it is the exact opposite, it is the mirror. So 2 degrees of Aries is the comedian entertaining the audience. Now, it's really a shame that comedy is, being attacked, because what it does is it provides an objective mirror for the collective to see itself. That is, and in using humor to dispel the energy, but still at the same time is providing the objective experience. That is what the comedian does. That's 2 degrees of Aries. So subjective experience absolutely needs an objective perspective to even exist. That is what 2 degrees of Aries is, the objective experience, characterized by the comedian, right? The comedian that holds the mirror up to the audience and uses humor to disarm the pushback against that objective reality. Well, 2 degrees of Cancer, if 1 degree is rooting ourselves somewhere, 2 degrees of Cancer is hovering over all of it and not making any emotional commitment to anything, right? And so right away, right after this equinox, we have this square, the first quarter square. What are we going to do? Are we going to identify ourselves through the objective experience? Are we going to see ourselves in the mirror of the comedian? Are we going to be the comedian? That's the other thing. Are we going to identify ourselves as the mirror, holding it up to the collective so we can each see the objective viewpoint of ourselves? Or are we going to just emotionally hover above all of it without making any type of commitment emotionally to anything? Now, I'm not saying one or the other is what we should do, but the square is going to be what provides the tension. So, sorry about that. The square is going to be what provides the tension of what we're going to do. Because if we're trying to figure, if we're working on realizing who we are, our dharma, how do we work interdependently within our own mind and psyche, and also with others in our immediate environment, we're immediately going to be challenged if we're going to get into it or if we're going to emotionally hover above it. And that's going to be right after the equinox. So we're going to feel this like burgeoning, right, of renewal and coming out of formlessness. And immediately we're going to have to deal with the opposite side of both of that aspect, which is not attaching at all and being completely detached and being objective when all we really want to do is express ourselves through this subjective reality. Oh, wow, that's going to be intense. So that's just this first week, right? So when we come out of that, the equinox and then that first quarter square, we are going to have some interesting we're going to have some other interesting things. Look at this. Venus is going to come into Aries that same day. Wow. So then you have the divine feminine aspect incarnate, Venus, the goddess of love, also coming into Aries, ready to emerge out of the ocean of consciousness. Oh boy. Mars is going to trine Saturn. Ooh boy. That is going to be incredible because this is about new lands. This is about silent inspiration that Saturn has been forcing us into. But at the same time, Mars is in this position where it's providing structural support, like foundational support to Saturn by opening up new lands of opportunity, right? The silence and the silent inspiration that Saturn is almost forcing us into, because we can't get around that right now. We need to be in this state of silence and be willing to take in the inspiration, not from anybody else, but from that silence. When we do that, it is completely, Mars finds the trajectory, right? Mars sees the new land that is opened up as a result of this and sees where it's going. That sacred warrior part of us will see the new land as a result of this connection here. This is really, and with Venus coming into Aries and this trine right here, and also with that, we have Mercury is going to sextile Uranus, 9 degrees of Pisces, 9 degrees of Taurus. Are we going to, wow, it's going to be very tempting to, especially with a moon in Cancer, we just want our security blanket. We just want to feel safe. We want to feel protected emotionally. We want to, find that containment system that allows us to be emotionally vulnerable without being unsafe. It's going to be really tempting to just detach from all of this. And there's going to be so much energy at the equinox weekend that is about burgeoning and coming out of formlessness and renewal and refreshment and inspiration out of a quiet and dark place that Saturn has been sitting at. And Mercury here in the sextile to Uranus, again, if we can let go of all of the superfluous things, if we can let go of unnecessary weight in terms of our thinking, our communications, our ideas with Mercury, we can really make the best out of what is going to seem like a dark period. This is where Uranus is in Taurus, right? Bringing the joy and celebration, being the ones to cultivate it within while we are still waiting for the cycle to play itself out, right? Taurus is the soil. And this part of the year, the first half of Taurus is really just the incubation period of the seed in the soil. And Uranus is about the awakening, the radical transformation that's coming through our ability to be patient. It seems so counterintuitive, but it really does also provide opportunities when there are disruptions in our material world, when there are disruptions in our resources. It brings us back to this ability to be patient, to allow the incubation period to do what is naturally meant to do. And if we can let go of all the, like I said, all the unnecessary baggage when it comes to thoughts, communications, or information, if we can let go of all the superfluous information, all the baggage, we can really consolidate our mental power and create something really, really beautiful and something that brings us joy, right? that's the sextile here. So this weekend, wow, there's so much potential here. If only we come into it consciously at the end of this Pisces cycle, going within, getting into the silence, and letting ourselves kind of surrender into the whole thing. Okay. Now, as we move through the second week leading up to the full moon, Mercury is going to square Mars. You can see it's getting closer to squaring Mars. And so at that point, there's an initiation process that's happening. And in terms of we will find ourselves in a process of being challenged and initiated into something. Our ideals will be challenged. And then we have a square to Mars, which is just a challenge in and of itself, because Mars demands action, and Mars is always about acting on something. And at 12 degrees of Gemini, it is really about liberating ourselves from the ghost of the past. And so we're going to be really challenged coming into this second week. This is where it's really going to start amping up towards this full moon. And so this week leading up to the equinox and the first quarter square is going to be all about the immersion of something, or like the immersion, right? Coming out of the formlessness into creation. And then the second week is really going to challenge our ability to, again, stay focused on the big picture, stay focused on the organic whole structure of what we're creating, and not getting pulled into the drama of whatever, right? And Mercury, and it's going to be in the realm of our mind next week, specifically with this square from Mercury to Mars. This is mutable square, right? It could land anywhere, and also could be anything. So it's very adaptable and malleable, but at the same time, it does require us to be also malleable and adaptable, and realize that we are going to be initiated on some level, while Mars is trying to take us out of the past, right? Those things are going to really cause a struggle. Now, as we're getting closer here, and the moon is going to come into Leo, so we know right there it's going to be, an opposition to Saturn. It's certainly going to trine all of the Aries energy. So, oh boy, by the time we get to the middle of next week, it is going to be like we're really going to be feeling very, very passionate, very lustful in terms of expressing ourselves emotionally. We are going to really feel that Kundalini energy within us starting to rise, and Saturn is going to be, Saturn is really going to provide a huge challenge to that, because we're going to want to come out of something, right? We're going to want to see the light, but it's the darkest before the dawn, isn't it? And Saturn is just like, yeah, you still have to wait. It's only in the silence that you are going to find this inspiration that you're looking for to move forward. Remember, there was that trine with Mars the week before in Gemini. And so Mars sees the newly opened lands and is ready to go there, right? And is very supportive of, and Saturn is giving a lot of structural support to that in terms of us being in that silent moment. I just don't think I could express it enough. But by next week, when the moon comes into Leo, it's certainly going to be in structural support to all of this Aries energy, including Chiron. And so we're going to be really feeling the fire next week. Internally, emotionally, very sensitive to it. The sun is in Aries, so we're going to be really expressing ourselves through this newness and the subjective experience. But it's also going to be, again, about Chiron at that 9 degrees of Aries, being able to stay focused on the big picture, okay? It's also going to square Uranus, okay? That's the moon squaring Uranus, Leo and Taurus. These are fixed energies. Ooh. Again, this is going to cause a lot of tension next week. So as we move closer to the full moon, so we got Mercury, it's going to square the nodes, right? Mercury in Pisces, more mutable squares. We'll talk more about that as we get closer. And Mars is going to conjunct right here, conjunct the North Node. Wow. This is about telepathy. isn't it? This is about being able to bridge the gap of communication through telepathy, being able to communicate across time and space instantaneously, because we recognize that with one pole, there is always another pole that is equal but opposite. And when we can bridge that gap outside of time and space, that's how we are able to engage with telepathy. And we'll also have a moon in Virgo. So, I mean, our emotions, we're going to start becoming very, very meticulous about them, very much embedded in the analysis of our emotions and how we feel, getting very particular, very analytical about our feelings, and very, very particular about our routine as well, and our hygiene, emotional hygiene. Virgo is very much about hygiene. So our emotional hygiene as well is going to be a big part of this as Mars meets the North Node. Wow, that's going to be such wow. That's the warrior riding the dragon, right? And really taking us to where we are headed, which is to be able to communicate telepathically, right? And when you're able to do that, nobody can hide anything from you, right? There are no secrets when there's telepathy. So let's see here. And that's also when Venus is going to conjunct the sun exactly. So that also, this is about existing in two realms at the same time. This is part of that Aries dynamic where within us, we start to feel the polarity, because you have to realize it within yourself before you can actualize it outside of yourself. So we each have to come to realize that polarity exists within us. And the seed is the same way. Everything that we need to create is within the seed, and then that's when chemical reactions start happening, and that's when the cells start to split and things start to move, and eventually the seed will split open and the sprout will come out. But before that happens, the sun and Venus coming together, it's going to be so brilliant, right? We're going to just be so it's just so attractive, and it's just so, and Venus in Aries, man, she pulls whatever she needs to her. And in this case, it'll be a little bit with some fierceness, right? She's not really worried about how it's affecting anybody else. She's just pulling towards her what she desires. And this is a very Princess of Wands type of energy. And so not really aware of how it affects other people. And so there's a lot of brilliance here, and there's a lot of charisma here, and there's a lot of attraction here with a Venus and Sun in Aries like this, but it's also very focused on the self, and it's very focused on the individual subjective experience. But it also does show that it's really about being able to exist within that polarity at the same time, and where we can go with that. That's going to become more clear as we go through the weeks, okay? The full moon on the 28th, that's what I talked about. Look at that, 888, everything at 9 degrees of Aries, that crystal ball, the gaze, the concentrated attention, and then a moon in Libra. And it'll be exact, let's see here, around this time in the afternoon on Sunday the 28th. And this is, like I said earlier, this is much more about the wounding will be so apparent. It'll be so on the surface. It will be such a bruise to our ego in some ways. It'll be very palpable. It will be very much in our material world with Venus involved. We'll be very sensitive to it. And it'll just be so on the surface that if we see it for what it is, it will illuminate so much about how to find inner balance and peace of mind, or it will illuminate what we have to let go of that has not given us peace of mind at all, but has been a false sense of balance. Okay, this full moon is going to be so illuminating and so intense. I mean, I can't, with the sun and Venus and Chiron all together in an opposition to the moon, it's going to be very, very powerful. So let's see here. We got the full moon, Mercury is going to conjunct Neptune as well. I already talked about that. We'll just believe anything at that point if we don't, if we're not connected directly to source, if we have not allowed our imagination and our mysticism to really come online with Mercury and Pisces. When it conjuncts with Neptune, we'll believe anything if we are not actually, especially with this full moon, if we see the representations of those parts of ourselves that we can look to for wisdom, right? The three masters hanging on the wall. If we saw that for what it was, then when we come around here to Mercury conjunct Neptune, we will absolutely connect very directly to inspiration about the peak experience and how to integrate it into our life. And peak experience, I mean, we are coming to it with Passover, with Good Friday, and then with Easter, which is also the third quarter square, the crisis in consciousness. So I'm going to go to that date, to Easter specifically, because this is really meant to just give you an overview. And so the moon will be in Capricorn, and there will be a third quarter square on Easter Sunday. So the crisis in consciousness. Where is our consciousness? The moon in Aries, or the sun in Aries, right? 15 degrees of Aries. And 15 degrees, it'll be 15 degrees. Let's go back a little. 15 degrees of, here we go, Capricorn. And what does this really represent here? So let me look at my notes here. There's so many notes. Just like there's so many buttons. Okay. So when we get to Easter, right, we are halfway through our Aries season with the sun. Venus is now crossed. Mercury is now in Aries. So now we have four objects. We have the sun, 2 planets, and an asteroid, all in Aries now. So, and in a square to a moon in Capricorn, which is making things very serious, very goal-oriented when it comes to our feelings, our emotions, our intuitions. We're very much focused on what we are building, being responsible, right? That Saturn energy, being responsible, having boundaries, the matrix of reality. We're going to be really feeling that, and it's going to be in a square to the sun, which is also surrounded by all of this other Aries energy, which is about newness, which is about potential, which is about desire. None of those things are involved with Capricorn, because Capricorn is the boss of the corporation. It is the CEO. It is the head of the clan, so to speak. It is the authority figure. And emotionally, we're really going to be focused on that authority figure and have all of this energy over here in terms of how we feel, like our sensitivity in our material world, how we identify ourselves, and even our mind now in the realm of new renewal, rebirth, potency, desire, and subjective experience. Oh my gosh. Oh boy. So even more things to pull us off our center, but also to get us really situated in a place where we are at a time of year of new things growing. We have to let go of the old. And this is part of the moon in Capricorn, is there's some tradition here when it comes to Capricorn, right? It is the institutions that we have built everything around. And so we are going to be feeling emotionally and very personally connected to what we're doing together, the institutions, the traditions that we all rely on, but and being conscious and aware of that. But there's so much in the realm of newness that it's really going to pull us towards that. Now, there's not to say there isn't anything to be said for this, but remember, the moon is a very transient experience, and those emotions will pass very quickly. And then eventually the moon, will meet Pluto, and then we again will have this eruption of very deep energies when it comes to our spiritual pathway to, our highest potential, which is still where Pluto is, but it's on a traditional basis, a collective basis, something that we've all worked to create, is being destroyed. And then when the moon meets Pluto like that, especially after this square, I think it will reinforce all of the square and all of this Aries energy that is pulling us towards this newness, right? Pulling us towards this renewal and this rebirth and this spring energy, something new being created by letting go of the old traditions, the old structures, and the old guard. And in a lot of ways, the old pathway up the mountain as well being eradicated in order to form something new. So, and then we have the last quarter here that leads up to the 11th, which is the very end of this lunar cycle. And as you see, within a couple of hours, the moon will meet the sun in late Aries, and we will have our first new moon of spring. So I know this is a lot of information. I try to keep it as concise as I can. But the big takeaway from a lot of this month is that we are coming into a period of creating something new. But if we want to manifest exactly what it is that we do envision, then we have to stay concentrated. And there will be lots of ways that our focus and attention will be pulled back into the large vastness of potential. We could easily, that's the thing about the first degree of Aries, is the woman coming out of the ocean and she's embraced by a seal. That's the Sabian symbol, which suggests that at any moment we could find ourselves being pulled back into this formlessness. There is that potential because it's just potential. And if we allow our potential to be hijacked and we cannot stay focused, and they will attempt. There will be many attempts to hijack it, because that's the Chiron is, and it'll be about triggering the wounding and the shame and the guilt for just being ourselves. If we allow that to be hijacked, then, and we can't concentrate on the full picture, how are we going to manifest what we are all wanting? Now, the demoralization is really strong, and it's going to become very obvious as we move through this lunar cycle. The spring equinox, like I said, is a time of renewal and rebirth, but it's very, it's new, right? It's very fragile. The seed hasn't even been planted yet. It just is nothing is guaranteed at this point. Nothing is guaranteed at any point except the cycle of time, right? And that in itself is a cycle and not a linear trajectory. That's the change is the only real constant. So even in this moment of potential and the desire to actualize, there's always the possibility that we could dissolve and regress back into formlessness, always. And so we have to be careful, and we have to be mindful, and we have to be sovereign. I think that that's going to be tested when the moon comes into Leo. So that is a time where we can really be aware and mindful of that. And all of the, Neptune and Pisces, Mercury meeting that, and the mutable squares with Mars, and the nodes. Well, the nodes kind of already passed. I shouldn't say that. The nodes have already passed the point where they were squaring Neptune. That was a little while ago. I think the potential for this newness and this potential to create something new could easily be hijacked. And we have to be able to be real with ourselves and our wounding so that we stay focused on the full picture, because it's the full picture that we are attempting to bring into concrete form eventually. And we see the trajectory, we know where we're going, we have Mars really activating our thought process and the movement of information, but there is still a lot of mutability, and there's still a lot of potential regression that can happen, which is why this new moon is really important to settle up with ourselves and to understand who we are and who we aren't. And accept our dharma so that when we come into this new cycle, we can stay focused and concentrate our attention on what it is we are here to bring about, so that we can do it in a way that minimizes the damage and minimizes the suffering, because nothing will stop what's coming. There are fixed points in time along this wave, right? This time wave. But how we get there and how the fractal unfolds is part of our responsibility. And if we do not understand ourselves coming into this cycle, then again, we get hijacked and we are thrown off course, pulled back under, however you want to look at it. So that is the lunar month report for March into April. So if you're interested in learning about how this cycle is going to impact you and how you can be a conscious co-creator, and you want to learn about your starseed origins, you can book a reading through catalystenergies.net. If you need support energetically, you can book Reiki or shamanic healing services through the website. And you can always reach out through social media, through email as well. Please subscribe, hit the like button, stay in touch with the content. Subscribe Star is coming. Once I get that all figured out, I will be able to put that in the description box too, that link. And then subscribers are going to get exclusive content, weekly astrology, more interactive, educational community, so that we can all learn how to ride this time wave together and consciously. So thank you for being here. Thanks for sticking it out. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comment section, or you can send me an email. I'm totally open to that. That's the thing about being a smaller independent content creator. I can actually interact personally with viewers and with clients because I don't have, a massive base of people that are leaving comments and wanting to send me messages. So I have a lot more ability to interact with people one-on-one, which is really great. And I really love that space. So take care of yourselves. We'll be checking in at the full moon for sure. And in the meantime, stay up to date with the dailies, because they really weave a lot of this into a much more intuitive transmission. So see you guys. Bye.